Show. It's uncut, it's unfiltered. This is the show of shows. This is the biggest names in drag racing. No holds barred.
Speaking his mind.
I've never had a problem expressing my opinions, but what we're doing here is bigger than that. These are conversations that need to be had in an unfiltered way.
Exploring hot topics.
Drag racing's all I've ever done. It's all I care to do.
And spreading the gospel of drag racing.
I respect the history. I appreciate how far we've come, but I want more for this sport, and I'll fight for it. This is the great American motorsport, drag racing.
The West Buck Show starts in 3, 2, 1.
Hey gang, Westbuck here, Drag Illustrated magazine, and believe it or not, it's not Wednesday. Somehow, some way, it's not Wednesday, but we had to bang out an episode of the podcast, so thank you guys for being here. A little bit of a different show today, but I gotta be honest, I'm genuinely excited about it. We typically get so wrapped up in whatever new big thing is happening in the sport of drag racing, and we've been blessed, especially here in 2022, to be able to deliver a whole lot of good news. But I gotta tell you, from time to time, it's kind of fun to get off that hamster wheel of reporting the news and reacting to the news and reacting to what's going on in the world and just do a little bench racing, right? Talk shop, dream, scheme, do all these things, play king for the day, or if I was president, all the things that I like to do when it comes to talking about drag racing. So that is exactly what we're going to do here on this particular episode of the West Buck Show. I do want to remind you guys, thank you for being here. Your participation makes all the difference. If it weren't for you and your involvement in these conversations, I don't know how exciting or interesting it would really be. I love talking drag racing with my friends, but it's really all of you and the feedback we get and seeing you out on the streets and out at the drag races around the country. It makes all the difference in the world. So thank you for being here. Guys, I got to bring the squad in. What's going on? Mike Carpenter, JT Hudson, what's up, boys? Why don't you guys explain to everybody why we can't go live next Wednesday? That'd be fun.
Vacation, baby.
Yeah, vacay.
The continuation of JT's ongoing vacation that he started
He's just
42 years ago.
He's just moving it to a different location.
I'm going to drink them out of rum and vodka.
Where are you going? Why don't you tell everybody where you're going?
I'm going to Playa.
Ooh, Playa del Carmen.
And then I'm going to... Yeah, we could have done the show. You know, I could have just streamed in from there, but you would have needed a translator because I would have been slurring so bad. So
I thought about it. I really did. I thought, you know what? We'll just do this like a beach remote thing and it'll be fun. But we've been talking for a long time about wanting to stack up some episodes, right? Because let's be honest, before we can talk about vacation, and I encourage people, like, this is a great thing. I'm glad you guys are going to spend some time with your family.
I'm going to need a vacation after my vacation.
Yes,
I'm
you
gonna go,
definitely will.
I'm going to go hang with JT after my vacation. Take the kids, wife and kids to the beach, which I don't know how much of a vacation that's going to be.
You'll have fun, though.
When you take the whole family, it's usually not a vacation for the parents.
No, we're gonna need some time off when we get back.
Work.
It really is a lot of work, man. I mean, I don't think people understand how much work that is, especially if you don't have kids. And, you know, I'll tell somebody like, oh, we're taking the kids somewhere. And they're like, oh, that'll be fun or whatever. And don't get me wrong. We have fun. We have a great time.
No, it's not.
But man, you're lugging stuff around. It is so exhausting.
I feel like I'm a mule.
My back hurts.
Yeah. I'm a mule. Load everything in the car, drive the car, unload the car, up flights of stairs, load the stuff to go to the beat. Like that's basically all I'm doing. It's just
pretty much
physical labor.
You think your day's over, and then your wife tells you, "Oh yeah, we got this planned for tonight too." You're like, "Oh my god,
dinner reservations." We're gonna. The kids are exhausted. Let's make sure we go out to a real nice place now that the kids are good and exhausted.
Yes,
good and pissed off.
Exhausted,
you know,
battling the ocean all day.
But we have been
JT,
talking about this,
I'm
right?
I'm coming down to Mexico after this.
I may come too, especially now that we don't have to test in and out. Like, my wife almost started crying when that news came out Sunday that the test in and out thing had been lifted. Thank God for that. But we have been talking about doing this, right?
I think
we been talking about this, like doing some of these pre-recorded episodes. And I know that we get in our own minds about like, no, we got to do it live. We
like to do it live. We like to interact and see what everybody just. That's kind of a cool part of it. Just to
Gary Vaynerchuk one time.
Vacation comes first this next week, so
man. And we need to have a few of these because the other thing is life happens, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, life happens. You injure yourself, or the wife's sick, or the kids are sick, or what have you. So having a few of these, I'm really proud of it. We've been working on this and developing some content and developing some ideas and conversation topics, conversation starters that we can use to create videos like this, create episodes of the podcast like this, where we're not, I mean, we talked about this off the air, Mike, but I think it's worth mentioning here and now. Really, not reporting the news has been a big part of the magic at Drag Illustrated, right? I mean,
That's
I
right.
vividly
Sure.
remember driving down the dual lanes, we call them in Kirksville, Missouri, where I'm from, born and raised. The duals, Highway 63. I vividly remember heading north, and I was on 63, headed north towards Iowa, I believe. I was getting ready to head toward Iowa.
What's the duels thing? Is that just because it's 2 lanes going
It's
each
2
way?
lanes, man.
Which
It's
is
a
like
big
a
deal.
novelty out
But-
there.
It's a big deal.
Actually, until just recently, we only had about
goodness.
what 3 miles of dual lanes, and everything else was single.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow.
it changed our
I have
lives in
never
Northeast Missouri.
heard
man.
that.
No,
yeah.
I mean the
The
dual
duals.
lanes, man. It was a great kind of a decent street racing spot. Great spot just to speed and like be an idiot and do stupid stuff kids do with cars. But I vividly remember driving north, and I can't remember what the news was, but we had just sent an issue of the magazine to print, and it changed. Like it was seismic. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was something in the door slammer world, and I'm like, son of a bit, like this is gonna be a whole thing. Like we'd sent this thing to print, and now the news is different and it's gone. Like that's one of the things that I remind people of a lot when it comes to the printed word.
Yeah,
The
it's there
severity of it is different, man. They talk about things living on forever on the internet. No
Not really.
doubt there's
You
some
can go
truth
edit
to
it.
that.
Yeah.
But it ain't quite the same as sending a file to print and having tens of thousands of copies of it directly mailed to people. I mean, I can't call everybody back and be like, hey, turns out that story we ran on this great new sponsorship development, we might have got a little ahead of schedule on that.
Would
So
you
anyways,
rip out page 68, 69, and 70, please?
or when you
It's-
misspell
dude,
a wife,
And
a
file it
wife's
in the trash
name.
can.
Man, there's a lot people. We don't probably labor over that enough because it is a very serious thing when you send something off to print like that.
It's changed me as a human being.
It has,
like,
man.
Making sure that everything or as many mistakes are minimized as possible before sending that thing to print because there's no changing. I think it's affected every other aspect of my life.
Oh,
as
I
well.
remember being so afraid. I mean, have you ever seen like in a movie or a video or something or seen your kids like mash the keys? Like you never did that. Like if I was working on a document for Drag Illustrated, you don't make a keystroke that you don't mean. You don't type. I mean, have you ever like been like, this guy's a dickhead, like just playing around or whatever
onto the cover.
Somehow that will end up on the cover of the magazine in bold, and there's no fixing it. So anyways, once we started to really wrap our heads around the permanence of the written word and how significant that is in its own right, like it's a very powerful medium that carries a lot of heft and a lot of weight and a lot of legitimacy. And I feel very strongly that everything that has happened here at Drag Illustrated over the course of the last 16 years is because of that printed magazine. I've said this a million times, but our flag flies higher in the digital space because of the foundation, the legitimacy, the gospel nature of the printed word. Like, I don't know that this podcast, I don't know our website, I don't know our events, I don't know anything, the parties, I don't know anything that we've done that would be what they were or what they are without the foundation that is that magazine, that is Drag Illustrated magazine. But we learned very early on that if we're going to spend our days reporting the news in print, it's going to be a rough go of it. So we had to pivot, right? And start telling human interest stories and telling behind the scenes stories and finding a different way to do what we've been doing as compared to try to compete with the internet and just report what's going on, race results. It was kind of boring and exhausting. And I'm glad to bring a little bit of that to the Wes Buck Show, man. And I appreciate you guys being willing, because it's the way this show has kind of developed. We were celebrating earlier this week, actually, 260 episodes. This is actually 261. But somewhere along the way, we really did kind of, JT, when you and I first started doing this, it was just like a Q&A. It was open-ended. You never knew what we'd end up talking about. It went off the rails almost immediately. We would go in with a plan. 5 to 7 minutes in, this deal was upside down and on fire, and we're ranting and raving about something. Sometimes it was me just by myself rambling for hours. But then we kind of settled into this routine here in recent years with you two being consistently on the show.
Started liking the show. Basically.
Mike started liking the show. That helped a lot. But we started to develop like a little bit of a routine where we were going to reply to, respond to current events and things happening in the racing world and whatnot, news. And that's great. Event coverage, whatnot, interview winners, interview top performers. But I got to say, man, I just want to shoot the shit a little bit sometimes, man. It's exhausting. Plus and this has been a great thing. So I hope nobody gets spun out about this, but then all these other podcasts have popped up. And I'm proud to have been an originator in this space. Like, I truly believe we've got one of, if not the OG show in drag racing, right? Especially when it comes to this format. But I don't want to do what everybody else is doing, And it became this thing of like a circuit. Like, if you win a race, you're going to be on that podcast, this podcast, that podcast. And ours being in the middle of the week, typically we were going to talk to somebody after they've already been talked to, or they've already talked on a couple of podcasts. So I started getting a little bit like, well, shit, man, you've already said all you got to say. I'll just talk.
Yeah, and we're like beholden to that. And so even if there's a hot topic we want to cover or something that we feel like we could do a better take on, oh no, we got to get all the winners from this past weekend on here. And while we like to do that, and I think it's a great way to shine a light on those people and kind of like make another big deal of the event before we go on to the next one the following weekend, it is tough to do that. I mean, reporting the news, there's some websites out there that specialize in that. That's a tough game. But our specialty has always been sort of zigging when everybody else is zagging.
And I think we provide a unique perspective. I've said this before, and I got to quit saying that, but we report on this sport from the inside looking around, right? I've always been very proud of our vantage point, is that I feel that we are a legitimate part of the racing fabric. We're a big part of this community. We've thrown our hat into the ring as event promoters, right? We put together a lot of the most talked about, most participated in social events that happen in drag racing. We steer a lot of conversation here, and I'm very, very proud of that. But I think that we do provide a little bit of a different perspective. We're not strictly journalists, right? We all have racing backgrounds. We've all spent our entire lives around.
I don't think anybody at DI claims to be a journalist.
I think Nate is
okay, Nate's
our editor-in-chief, classically trained, went to college for it. I even tried to talk him into quit. I mean, feel bad because I actually told him, like, hey, man, I'm going to hire you whether you graduate or not. So if you just want to go ahead and start, like, let's get it done, He's like, no, I really want to finish school, But he's a classically trained journalist, but I'm not. Like, I struggled with high school English, man. I couldn't make it through college. So I was 14 days into college when I threw in the towel. I vividly remember the algebra class that I was in going, nope, not today. Yeah, I'm done. I don't even know that I let him finish class. I think I just left. Yeah, I'm sure I did.
I mean, I honestly feel like that's part of the magic. And just looking at things from a different perspective, it's great to have someone like Nate to kind of anchor it and bring us back to center. But like you said, being more ingrained in the sport and being on the inside looking around, I think brings, at least for us, more value than being a classically trained journalist.
Well, and I certainly have an appreciation for those folks. Absolutely. And there's times I fancy myself a writer at this point in time. I love to write. I actually realized a couple of months ago that it may be something. I thought I didn't like it as much as I like it. But whenever you introduce the confines of like deadlines and certain subjects and certain topics, I found myself over the course of like 175 some odd issues of the magazine, now 176 we just sent to print. The freedom to talk about whatever I want is really what I needed. Like, that's what I was passionate about writing.
Time. It takes time. I mean, back when you were writing most of the magazine, we would take 6 or 8 weeks between an issue. We weren't supposed to be, but that's what it ended up happening. And it just, because we were focusing on, I mean, you were pouring your heart and soul into these stories, me doing the same with the layouts and everything. And it just ended up taking a longer time. But that's where, like, having Nate and the rest of our team to just keep it moving and always be able to kind of tell an awesome story, but within the confines of our deadlines.
Have you ever thought about these newspaper columnists that crank out a badass, opinionated editorial every day? I mean, I don't know that any of those folks get the credit they deserve. Because if you start thinking, if you're a beat writer for the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Kansas City Chiefs, and you've got to come up with like a unique perspective or take on something every single day,
every day,
and be on Twitter, and you got to like share that take on Twitter and
get ripped to shreds for it.
Yeah. And then go write your column.
Like the NHRA dropped their video game today, and I literally had a big take on it, and they didn't drop it. They made all the news official, right? NHRA Speed for All, it's called. I'm already going to derail our conversation, but I just thought we'd touch on it briefly. But to be honest, I was like, all right, I'm going to bang out like a little hot take on this video game. But then I was like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with, I don't have time today to argue on Twitter or Facebook for the rest of the afternoon. So I'm just not going to say it. And I think about all these sports writers that just do it anyways. Like I was watching a video yesterday with Skip Bayless, or it was Stephen A. Smith from ESPN, who's, I mean, in many ways, I believe the face of ESPN almost at this point in time, or at least all their morning kind of programming or primetime sports programming, major sports programming. But he was talking about Skip Bayless, who used to be his co-host on ESPN First Take. And he was just talking about Skip Bayless's willingness to just say whatever he thinks and live with the consequences. And while I disagree with that guy, I hate him. I don't like him at all. I don't know that there's anybody in media that I despise the way that I despise Skip Bayless. And he may be a pretty cool dude. I don't know. He's
a Cowboys fan too, right?
He is a Cowboys fan, but he's a
Lakers fan.
I just don't. But he said some really, who said some really stupid stuff the other day? Stephen A. Smith. He said that he would take Anthony Davis, talking NBA. He would take Anthony Davis over Luka Doncic. And I'm like, bro, we've just broken up. Like our opinion, we've just went our separate ways. It was good while it lasted.
Healthy, but the man's never healthy.
And I don't think I would take him if he was healthy. I mean, Luka's 22. I mean, you've got infinite upside on this guy, and he's already, in my opinion, a top 10, maybe top 7, 6 player in the league right now, and he's barely old enough to order a beer at dinner. I mean, it's bananas to me. But anyways, my point is, I tip my cap to all these guys that are willing to say whatever they think, and even when they have to know that it's just going to create a shitstorm of controversy, right? I mean, and how reactive everybody is, like, the Cowboys suck the day after they lose, but they win next weekend, and I think they've got a title run in them. I think they do. And it's like, what? How can you change your opinion? But it's their job.
That's what
right? That's what media has become.
Yep.
Yeah, they do that a lot.
There's a lot of that, but it's entirely driven by the news cycle, which we're making. This is kind of a cool way to book in the conversation, and the reason for today's episode being a little different than normal is the news cycle being 24/7. It didn't used to be that way, right? SportsCenter would go on, and then they would like replay it a couple of times, and it'd be like dead air or some game or whatever. Whereas now, almost all of these sports analysts or whatever you say, the commentator, they're entertainers, right? They're personalities, and they are paid not to report the news, but to provide their unique opinion and perspective on the news and live with the consequences, right? And it's just a wild time, to be honest.
Which is what we're doing here.
Yeah, man.
Really,
so
that's what we're doing.
Let's
going live and saying this stuff every week and having to live with it. It's been kind of a new experience, but kind of liberating
for you. JT and I have been dealing with the consequences of what we say. Yeah. Do you think back to do you remember, JT, when I had that like extremely heated exchange with Billy Stocklin? I mean,
I froze up there, buddy.
Oh, I don't know if you had remember the extremely heated exchange I had with legendary crew chief Billy Stocklin. We got into like a really heated argument, and I think that was back when I would call people and then hold the phone.
Oh, we had all kinds of shit set up, Bluetooth speakers, and the
Bluetooth was the best.
The Bluetooth was the best, man.
The Beats pill.
We tried so many different things, but
kinds of things.
But it's funny how far technology has come, because right now in 2 seconds, I remember when the first handful of times we tried to do a video, pipe in a video stream or whatever via Skype, or I believe we were trying to use Skype video. We had this $1,000 software that I had to buy, bought this software. I would have to have the person download this app. I mean, they'd send them this unique IP address. It was a complete disaster. Whereas now, like, text someone a link and then I'm staring at them in 8 seconds.
It's crazy. It
really is crazy.
Like we had a phone strapped to a box at one point, like duct tape to a box.
Quite literally.
Yeah.
It's come a long way, boys. It's come a long way.
At one time, he was like,
Do you remember that?
I
You
have
took a
picture
picture.
of it,
There's a
yeah.
photo of it
We
somewhere.
need that. We
Oh
need that
my
photo.
gosh. All right. Hey guys, we got our first question of the day real quick, and I'm gonna read a little script read here real quick. I want to remind everybody that the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by the team at Elite HP, the world leader in used race cars, racing engines, parts, and tools. Located in Fort Worth, Texas, Elite HP is operated by real deal drag racers with over 100 years of combined racing experience who can steer you in the right direction for all your racing needs, whether it's a turnkey pro mod car or a set of pro jacks. Check out their entire inventory at www.elitehp.com. Guys, Mike, it may just be you and I for now. Okay, here we go. We got Murder Tundra back.
Yeah, I left.
Internet issues out there in the Midwest.
All right,
today.
first conversation of the day here is this is something that's been in the news a lot, right? A lot of, I will say it, right, negative commentary about the track closures that we've seen here in the last couple of years. Most specifically, Phoenix, Arizona, that was a tough one, right? Hate to see Wild Horse Raceway go away. Palm Beach International down in Florida, that was another heartbreaker. The NHRA owned Atlanta Dragway outside of Atlanta, Georgia. Most recently, Memphis, Tennessee, but there have been a slew of these. So I do think it begs the question, friends. The NHRA, by all accounts, I don't see any chance. We could have a whole separate discussion about the fact that they shouldn't add any events. They should just
or reduce the schedule.
They should reduce the schedule or reduce it further. And I think we'll save that for another conversation, another day, knowing that the NHRA more than likely is going to fill those holes with new events. I want to ask you guys and have this discussion. What track should the NHRA bring a national event to next? I'm going to ask that you don't say go back to Denver a second time or go back to Epping a second time or go to Charlotte a third time. Try to bring me something new, man. Mike, JT, I'll turn it over to you before I start throwing ideas out. We can discuss this for a little while.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right. Well, I mean, we've heard a lot about some potential candidates for replacing some of these tracks. Yeah. We've heard Tulsa, right? That's on the menu, or NHRA is investigating the possibility there. What are some other ones, Wes, that we've heard about?
Man, this stuff gets thrown around so much, you know, and knowing as much as I do about like the inner workings. Like Tucson Dragway in Arizona. Tucson, that's probably been Tulsa and Tucson. It's funny that they're both Tulsa start with T. But between those two, those are probably the most talked about as far as feasible, like relatively realistic, like something could happen. Exactly. But also, I mean, not that long ago, Orlando Speed World Dragway. I know that Ozzy Moya's phone rang in regards to that. Valdosta. Don't you remember the competitionplus.com Eastern Spring Test Nationals?
And Valdosta would be kind of a replacement for the Atlanta area. But I feel like that area of the country over here on the East Coast is pretty well taken care of and saturated. I feel like where they're losing these tracks are in the Midwest and on the West Coast, especially. That's why maybe they're looking at a Tucson or a Tulsa. And I think those facilities are, I'm sure, adequate track surfaces and provide, everything that needs to be there. Maybe the fan capacity is a little low and the pit parking maybe a little lower than what, as far as paved pits for the pro teams, maybe a little lower than what they're looking for. But they go to a New England Dragway. I feel like NHRA has embraced in the recent years by like returning or going to Epping, which used to be an IHRA track, flipped to NHRA, and then got a national event. They've I don't want to say lowered the bar, but they've accepted that, hey, we can go to a ZMAX or Pomona or Dallas, but then we can also go to somewhere like Epping. And the place that's maybe off the radar that popped into my head is Firebird Raceway in Boise, Idaho.
Boise. So you're going like, screw the Midwest. We're going to bring drag racing back to the upper.
Well, if you think about it, man, there's really, upper Midwest, Pacific Northwest area. They go to Seattle, but it always feels like that place is a little bit
And that
in
place has a
jeopardy.
rabid fan base. I hate to
Yeah.
admit that I've never been there, and I'm going to actually fix that probably in the next calendar year, I would say.
Yeah, but Firebird has a huge independent event. Kind of reminds me of Norwalk,
Night Fire
with
Nationals,
with
right?
The Night
Yeah.
Fire, the Pepsi. I don't know if it's sponsored by Pepsi anymore. The Pepsi Night Fire Nationals have been it was a huge independent event for many years. It continues. I think they're 40 plus years into it at this point. They used to have pro mods out there. My dad would go out there and rave about the event, the crowd, the new
track
family,
is notorious for the infrastructure that they have, like a really tightly run program,
which
well-kept
you
facility.
Of like a Norwalk or something like that,
Bandamere,
right? Family
Norwalk,
owned, Bandamere is another great example. Family owned, take a lot of pride in what they do, and that's a market and an area of the country that I feel like NHRA could bolster, their presence in, and are losing. So that, to me, I don't even know if that's a possibility or what the sanction is at Firebird, but to me, that type of event, plus No Prep Kings goes there. They're returning there again this year, and if it can house an NPK event, I mean, I hate to say this, probably going to catch some heat for this. If it can house an NPK event, it can house an NHRA event.
The only issue is parking, right? I mean, we had this conversation earlier in the week with Dion, right? Like, he asked us what's stopping NHRA from going to a handful of tracks, and he threw some names out. And it's not like bad market. That's never the conversation. And sometimes it's not inadequate seating, right? But it's almost always pits don't have enough real estate.
Infrastructure.
The size, an NHRA national event is a lot of shit. Like, there are
a lot of cars, not just the pros. All
the sportsman cars.
And you've got to have a tower. You've got to add adequate tower and media housing. I mean, there's still more media attends an NHRA national event than any other drag racing event. Where are you going to put those people? So they've got to have a few kind of benchmark things. And then I think it's up to NHRA to decide. And we've talked about this in the past. Could you have, maybe you only send 2 pro classes there. Maybe you only have a couple of sportsman classes. Make it a house show. We talk about wrestling a lot. Not everything has to be WrestleMania or Monday Night Raw. Have a house.
It could be argued that you need those smaller events.
Yeah, Thursday Night Smack or whatever it was.
SmackDown. That's still a thing, man. That's still a thing. T, what do you have any off the top of your head?
I was thinking like Bradenton, and Victor is doing all kinds of improvements.
God knows he's spending some money.
Yeah, he's spending a lot of money. And so, some tracks like that, the guys that are spending some money and putting in the work and turning, we've talked before about people letting the maintenance go and this and that. But you've got guys out there that are putting in the work and putting the money into their tracks. So you might have some of those tracks pop on the radar.
Man, there's a couple that pop into my head, and I've heard a lot of momentum towards a Tulsa race. I've heard a lot of momentum towards a Tucson race. Couple of, Todd Martin and Keith Haney, the ownership at Tulsa Raceway Park. They've done a great job.
Yeah,
Tulsa is now in my backyard a little bit. I mean, I can be in Tulsa in a few hours driving.
I think that speaks to, I mean, you're in Fort Worth, you're in
Missouri,
and you both say, hey, it's within driving distance. I mean, that's a pretty key location.
Tucson, I do think I've only been to the NHRA Arizona Nationals, I think three or four times. I've not been out to that part of the country a lot, admittedly. However, I've always been taken by the fanfare there. When I went to the NHRA Arizona Nationals just last year, I believe it was, I went out there. I couldn't get, there's people everywhere. The stands were packed. I think I did.
I didn't know that.
That's a fun one because like my buddy Fran from Tequila Commissario lives there, and he always brings a big group out. It's funny. They actually rent one of those 18-foot U-Haul trucks and back it up to the fence, and they put beams in it to make it a deck. Like they literally go to Home Depot, buy 2x4s and whatever, and build a structure inside the U-Haul so that they can stand on top of it and watch races from the top of it without it caving in the roof. Right? And they party and they have a big time, but they are one of a gazillion hardcore race fans that exist. The last time I saw that group of guys actually was at the U.S. Nationals last year. They flew out. They flew out specifically for the race. Yeah, we saw
Fran in 2020 at the U.S. Nationals.
Right. And so he was there last year as well. And it's a really cool area that I think the NHRA sees value in. So that's why I think the Tucson deal. Jim Hughes, incredible guy.
Yep.
Jim and Robin Hughes. Jim has a massive hand involved with the Street Outlaws No Prep Kings series.
Yep.
A great human being that is beloved in our industry. And I think that if there was a guy that I would want to be at the helm of the NHRA's next national event, he's the guy without a question.
And I think that makes a big difference.
It does. It does. But I'm going to tell you this. How about Chicago? We're sleeping on
what's going on with
Route
Chicago?
66 Raceway.
Like,
what do you guys say?
Go away?
Do you say route or route?
Route.
Okay.
No,
it's
route. I don't know.
Is it Route 66
I've never
Raceway?
said Route 66 in my life.
Yeah.
I've said Route 66.
Well, Route 66 Raceway, I don't know if either one of you guys have been there.
From up north.
Beautiful facility. Stunning. It's a state of the art. When they kicked the doors open on that place, people's heads blew up. I mean, it was insane. Stadium style seating.
It looks like something out of a video game or something.
It really does, man. And it to me, the fact that that place doesn't have an NHRA national event is absolutely
what
criminal.
happened with that? Let's go, what's the refresher course on that? Because there was all kinds of controversy, and then they lost the national event. Supposedly it was being sold, right? Or
I think the
was gonna
track
be turned into something else.
There's two facilities there. There's the NASCAR track and there's the drag strip, and they're like on the same basically piece of property in Joliet, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. And there's been ownership changes, management changes, and I honestly, it baffles me. Like, how can you even have an event or facility like that?
I mean, it was built for NHRA national events.
It was built for NHRA national events. Like, what is going on? And I would say it's just like the ownership group, right? I don't know all the ins and outs of it. I actually needed a refresher course on this. I used to know a lot more about it because I would talk to Animal Jim about it and talk to a handful of people, talk to Ron Leak about it and the gang up there from Cordova Dragway. God rest his soul, a wonderful guy and innovator in drag racing. But you think about how Byron, Illinois, Byron Dragway, the playground of power. I mean, that track packs them in there, man. The wheel standing championships. They do a bunch of the meltdown drags in the summer. They do a bunch of independent events that are bangers, bro. I mean, bangers. But so that said, how the hell can you not make Chicago work? And if you think about all the street racers and all the car culture, I mean, there's like a whole group of guys from that area that are on No Prep Kings, right?
Chicago's the third biggest market in the country, right? Behind, isn't it? I always want to say it is behind LA and New York.
In New York, I think it's in the mix, right?
Yeah,
we're talking out our ass now.
close.
But I mean, how does drag racing not have a footprint in Chicago, Illinois? And plus, you've got luxury suites, you've got killer media, major market, no more grandstands need built. I don't know what condition the track is in like right now, but I can't imagine it's bad, right? Or not. It'd probably be easier to fix whatever needs to be fixed with the
Chicago
track.
is number 3.
Okay, then build out a brand new facility essentially somewhere else. And that's an underserved part of the country. I mean, I truly think that that's the spot. The only other
you
tracks
pull from the Midwest over here, and then you're pulling from the up north.
It's 6
'Cause
hours,
a lot of people,
6.5 hours
from
from
up
you.
north used to hit that Chicago race, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, man. I mean, I would drive as a young man. Me and a handful of buddies, we would literally tugboat Danny Guffey, a couple of my buddies. We would load up in my mom's Tahoe, and we would drive to Chicago for the NHRA national event. We would, try to see how fast we can make it, but we could easily make it under 7 hours.
Connie's funded a lot of racing, drag illustrated activities.
She has. She really has.
Shout out,
man.
Connie.
Shout out, Mom. But no, dude, that's such a cool facility. Chicago, for all of the bad rap it gets, is kind of an amazing city. It's hard
I had
to
fun when I went there.
I like Chicago, man. I don't dislike Chicago.
Do you think that races like Brainerd have benefited from the fact that there is no Chicago, there's no like mega event there that because I always just think somewhere like Brainerd, it was like oversaturation or they struggled because maybe they had other events in that area. But with Chicago gone, I feel like Brainerd has thrived. I don't know how close those even are, but I always as a person in the South, I lump all those type of places together.
You know where else I think it probably helps? It probably helps Indy. With turnout, and it probably helps St. Louis with turnout, and it possibly helps Topeka to be. I mean, just because there's
I'd say for sure,
I mean, there's just not. Yeah, it probably helps Norwalk a little bit. I mean, looking at the map, I'm going, okay, not having a race in Chicago, St. Louis is 5 hours away, so you're definitely headed south. Like if you're a Chicago-based race fan, NHRA rolls into St. Louis in September. you're headed there. There's no doubt in my mind you're going to that race. But I can't imagine that Chicago can't support a standalone, a major national event. I think what a guy would have to do is find a way to brand it as the next Gator Nationals. Like, find something that you can latch onto and start a tradition there. Maybe merge.
I think at its height, it was one of the premier events.
It
was a marquee
I think
event.
it was. I mean, that's why I drove my mom's Tahoe up there with like $8 in my pocket and her credit card, because that was like a spot. Like, you
Her
had
credit
to,
card again.
Yeah, her
Connie's
credit card.
Connie's credit card is on the DI Hall of Fame.
It is. We should get that Capital One card framed or something. But seriously, that
I'll pay you back.
I'll pay you back. That was an incredible. I think that's an incredible venue. But the only other argument that I could make, and we won't spend a whole lot of time on this, we got a lot to cover, but Darlington, like Rockingham, I know drag racing's well represented in Chicago or in Charlotte, and on the East Coast as a whole. But man, I've seen NASCAR do these throwback events. They went back to Darlington, right? Now they've got a freaking dirt track race. Could an argument not be made for some throwback NHRA weekend? Like you said, Mike, maybe you reduce the event a little bit. Maybe it's not a 600, 700, 800 car event with your sportsmen and pros. Maybe it's a pro show with kind of like the video game where you run like all your pro categories, but then you've got a couple sportsman classes or one sportsman class that provides some downtime filler and stuff like that. I know people are sensitive to that term filler, but you get what I'm trying to say. I don't know. I could see a throwback weekend where Ron Capps runs a throwback paint scheme and all the Top Fuel dragsters run throwback paint schemes. I mean, a lot of these, you think about it. Don Schumacher, he do a tribute to Don Schumacher, right? He's got a car out there right now. Do a tribute to Connie Cletta. He's got a car out there right now. Do a multitude. Last year or 2 years ago, we saw Mike Salinas do the Blaine Johnson throwback car, which was sick. Like, looked so good. Oh my God. But I think something like that would be really well received, or maybe use a stop like that to start. And I'm not, we're going to upset the apple cart here, but maybe you let that be an event where Pro Stock is the main attraction or Pro Mod is the main attraction. Like, have that be your door slammer race out there in door slammer country.
That would be the area to do it.
I don't know. It's just a thought. I would love to see those Rockingham and Darlington, to me, are just synonymous with drag racing and synonymous with door slammer.
We'll
drag
see what
racing.
kind of, we talked about Rockingham getting that grant from the state of North Carolina. We'll see what they do with those improvements. We plan to go to the No Prep Kings event there in October.
Yeah.
I haven't been to Rockingham in several years. Interested to see what that place looks like. But we know that Darlington has been refurbished incrementally over the years that Russell Miller and the Miller family have had it. Now it's in the hands of Jeff Miles, which I fully expect for it to continue its ascent.
Oh yeah, I think it's in great hands with Jeff Miles. I'm actually genuinely excited for that opportunity for Jeff and what he's going to, what it means to the sport of drag racing, man. It's a big freaking deal if you ask me, guys. I don't know.
Yep.
All right, on to the next one. But before we do, I'm going to do a little script read. I'm going to pay some bills, guys. How about it, right? Ladies and gentlemen, let me take a minute to remind you all that the Westbuck Show is brought to you by our friends at Redline Synthetic Oils. Redline has a reputation with racers and hardcore enthusiasts for creating products that perform and protect better than any on the market, and they've been doing it since 1979. Whether it's your race car, your tow rig, your motorcycle, or your lawnmower, when you think about lubricants, you need to think about Redline. For more information, log on to redlineoil.com. Guys, I think this is going to be a little bit of a fun one because it's out there. I wanted to find a way to work a would you rather into this show. It's one of my favorite things to do with my kids and do with my wife. It's a great bar conversation starter. And this one's pretty extreme, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. Would you rather see drag racing ban track prep in its entirety or ban the use of wheelie bars? Mike, I'm going to throw it in your lap first.
I would rather see track prep banned because I'm a big tires and bars guy, and I feel like we're seeing the success of that right now with No Prep Kings. Big tires, no prep, wheelie bars. That's where things have gone. I think that the whole track prep thing and no bars is a radial thing. And I have a lot of respect and admiration and fully appreciate what those guys do on those radials. But I'd rather see track prep banned. I think with technology, with automatic transmissions and engine management, fuel injection,
traction control,
suspension,
all this stuff,
traction control, tire technology, all this stuff. It's almost, I mean, I think No Prep Kings is proving like track prep is kind of becoming optional. and we've gone,
yeah,
I mean, and NHRA, right? NHRA does a fairly moderate track prep in the sake of safety and tires not coming apart on the fuel cars. So for me, it's definitely ban track prep. We got to keep the bars.
I don't know why we got to ban either. that's my take. No, but I mean, I don't know. I guess I'd be track prep as well.
Really?
But I don't really see a big problem with track prep. I mean, besides in radial, that's the only time where I go, oh my God, are they ever going to run?
Man, but a lot of these door slammer races are trending that direction. I mean, not trending, are pretty.
They gotten a little carried away.
It's over center, in my opinion.
And a good thing would be is that it would make the track the equalizer, as they say, even in no prep. But so a lot of these programs, it would get these cars a little closer together, maybe, and maybe you wouldn't have to spend quite as much money, and you wouldn't have to be quite as fast, and I don't know.
The reason I threw this question out there's a bunch of them because I think it's fun. But have you guys ever read that article that Brett Kepner penned many, many moons ago? It was called "The One Rule That Would Fix Everything," and it was written from like the perspective of how can we make drag racing the most exciting, talked about thing on the planet overnight. And it was a pretty talked about. Still, I'm referencing it right now. 20 years later, probably. Brett Kepner penned this article and he said the one rule that would fix everything: ban wheelie bars. Because he talked about how people want violence, people want chaos, people want insanity, and this device has eliminated that in many, many ways. In many, many ways, especially
it's eliminated like caution or tiptoeing that line between throwing everything you've got at it and blowing over or going airborne with the door cars. And I think that's a big part of what he was saying there.
I agree. And I think it's an interesting perspective because you take the wheelie bars off a pro stock car and those things go from being seen as like docile and calm and easy, whatever going there to being a real problem. I mean,
you got to change the whole setup.
Setup.
A current pro stock car, when it launches, like it's going to flip over or whatever. Yeah. Like, and most of these cars will. You got to change. It would rework everything we know about.
It would be cool.
Door car racing.
It'd be cool to see because it'd be such a tuner's game, right? Like,
well, I mean, in Top Fuel and Funny Car, man, they rely on those things at this point as well.
Figure out how to try to get some power down. It would be pretty cool.
Top Fuel and Funny Car, at one point, they didn't have wheelie bars on them, right? And then they started slowly putting them on, and I can remember they even had them, and they were up high enough, or the car was set up to where it was only there just to prevent a blowover.
Just to prevent a blowover. Yeah, I mean, and you remember like the way some of those Top Fuel cars would launch with like one front wheel like 1.5 feet in the air and the other one like 8, 10 inches off the ground,
dangling like that.
Oh my God. You think it's weird because we're bad about, my opinion would definitely be track prep. I think that story that Brett wrote, it doesn't have, it's different now because of all the technology that you mentioned, Mike. Like there's so many ways to keep your car from wheeling with technology and these, there's so many technological tools to use now that the wheelie bar obviously is still a huge tuning tool and still massively important, but it's definitely different. I would say also banning track prep as a whole for a couple of reasons. Right now, current events wise, you can't hardly get this stuff.
It'd be good to do right now.
I mean, you can't hardly get your hands on track prep. I mean, or traction compound. There's apparently a chemical that's made in China that is, I know the name of it, but I don't think I'm supposed to say, that is apparently not being manufactured. China doesn't want it produced there anymore. And so now people are scrambling, and the only people that have glue right now are people that have have a stockpile of it.
Maybe
So be some pretty gnarly shit if China doesn't want to produce it.
Yeah, right? I know, right? Yeah. It seemed odd to me. But anyways, apparently it's a whole deal. Or maybe it's not China. I think it's actually Germany. Where's my notes at? Hold on. Well,
I think it is Germany.
It is Germany. I misspoke. Yeah, it's a chemical that's manufactured in Germany that they no longer want manufactured there. And it's creating
that makes a lot more sense.
That
Germany
makes a lot more sense.
Is cranking down on a lot of that stuff.
I don't know where I wrote it down. Regardless, my point on that though is just that I do think we got over center. I point at the advent of like the traction crews, like the traction twins, then the dream team with Tyler Crossnow and Jason Ruckert from VP Racing Fuels. There's been all these guys and Mass Traction, right?
We
Kurt
celebrated.
Johnson.
We had the Traction Twins on the cover
of the magazine, man. And I
celebrated that whole movement.
I don't
look what these guys are
it.
doing to change the sport, and then it just so quickly.
What a classic case of drag racers drag racing, right? Yeah. We will take something good and just push it beyond great into fucking horrible disaster as quick as humanly possible.
Yeah. Faster than any blink of an eye, man.
Right? You know, there's a meme we posted on the Drag Illustrated social channels one time, and it was racers know how to overdo anything. And it was a car pulling. It was Camp Stanley, actually. Camp Stanley, Shannon Davis from Davis Traction Control, Davis Controls. It was like 6 people standing behind John Stanley's car, their Camaro, when they had it, that orange Camaro with the purple flames on it. There's like 6 people standing behind it with cameras. It's like, guys, surely one, 2 to 6 or 8 people need to be outfitted. Man. No, you need every angle, right? And that's just a classic example of how far racers will push the envelope.
You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't in like the radio world, because one track is, I mean, they were literally trying to blow the scoreboards down, right? Like set records, and it was a big thing on which track had those records, correct? So if you weren't throwing the prep
glue at it,
I mean, like, then you probably
weren't going to
get the record.
There was people. So, don't you remember, JT? We'd go to race and be like, they've hardly sprayed this thing. What do they expect us to do? You know, and it's like
you can't breathe. You can't breathe from all the VHT in the air.
Yeah, it's crazy. I got to my dad about this
so you don't stick to the track.
He was asking me something about what do you think they should do to speed the show up, man? They got to get this thing over with, man. Well, they got to run this thing faster. And I'm like, yeah, but you were just telling me yesterday how you didn't think the track was as good as it should be, or it's like we can't have it. It's very difficult to have all these things. You can't.
That's probably why we have a VHT shortage now, or a traction compound.
1,000,000%.
We used it all up in the last 10 years.
Oh, 1,000,000%. I mean, we've been using it like it's. I mean, they were going to quit making it or something. I mean, I don't know. It was like we're going to quit making it.
Valdosta to try to can it. You know,
oh, dude, man, it's very tough because I think racer, like when you go to the racetrack, you expect that racetrack. I'll tell you about my local track right here. There's 2 of them. Texas Motorplex, TJ Bailey, Cheeseburger, Eric, the whole crew out there. And then you've also got Extreme Raceway Park right down the road, 15 minutes away. In Ferris, Texas, both right outside of Dallas, Texas. They are both known for being badass racing surfaces, right? Like they take tremendous pride in it. TJ Bailey puts on a private track rentals all the time at Texas Motorplex. He's actually had to pull back on them because of this traction compound issue we've talked about. But
we've seen that across the board a lot.
He takes such personal pride in providing a surface for the local street car and hobby racer contingent to go out there and run their personal best. Mm-hmm. He knows that the track's going to. He seriously takes serious pride in making sure that he's given these guys and gals the best track they've ever raced on. And that's awesome. But at the same time, it is tough because that makes it's very hard to replicate that like on race day conditions with a crowd when you're trying to keep the pace of a show. At a private track rental, that's one thing. You know, but in the throes, in the heat of battle, when you're trying to produce a well-run, organized, well-paced event, factoring in countless hours of track prep time, I mean, we've made fun of it, right? Pro Drag Tractor. I put on Facebook the other day that like if I'm anybody looking to advertise to drag racers or race fans, I'm sponsoring one of these John Deeres. I'm sponsoring one of these tracks that are tractors that are spending, I don't know, multiple hours going up and down the racetrack each weekend. And I know that a racer wants the opportunity. This was what I talked about with my dad. He's like, well, Dad, you know, once I've driven all the way across the country, the track better be badass. I want to run the best. And it's like, it sounds like you want to go land speed racing. You know what I mean? It kind of sounds like you want to, maybe you should just rent a track somewhere, have them prep the shit out of it, and just make runs and set your personal best if that's what you want to do. But if you want to go race in a competitive environment, if you want to drag race, I mean, I think that obviously there's a threshold. The track's dangerous, or we soaked it in water. There's obviously a limit to this insanity. But I'm telling you, man, I think reducing traction compound usage across the board, no better example than what we're seeing with No Prep Kings and Street Outlaws. It can be done. You can still race and still go fast.
And the track would get better as the weekend went on at your event, because you're going to get more rubber down.
Yeah, and
which was always a thing in racing, man.
It was.
You had to know the track.
The track's going to come around tonight. It's going to be tight
come
tonight.
around. It's going to come, and then there is no coming around. It's got to be come around at 10 a.m.
Literally,
car turns the tire, which is just not how it was always done prior to that.
I totally understand we don't want every race to be a pedal fest. We want to see full pulls. We want to see side-by-side racing. But some of the most exciting moments that I've seen so far in 2022 have been some pedal fests, right? A pedal fest between, and we've talked about it. Like, who do you want to be? Who wouldn't you want in the other lane if it came to a pedal fest? We're talking about Doug Coletta or Sean Langdon or some of these guys that are notoriously good at driving. I think that's a fun conversation.
In a nitro class, when both cars blow the tires off,
the crowd goes crazy.
I perk up.
Me too.
I'm like, this is going to be fun to watch. That kind of says it all.
It does. I love having that layer, and it lets us talk about drivers, because we, at moments, if the track's perfect and the cars are perfect, we have to be weary of eliminating the human factor. Like, the person behind the wheel has to be a difference maker. Otherwise, we're racing RC cars. And I think that's kind of taken off a little bit, but like, there's like 87 people showing up at the RC Car Nationals. Like, I don't think that's the direction we want to go, at all. I think we want to keep the humans involved and let them be a difference maker. Let these guys have to make those decisions, drive the shit out of it. We want to see that. And it's tough because you can't say that you want more people in the stands. You can't say that you want more sponsors. You can't say that you want more visibility. You want more eyeballs. And you got to give somewhere. We've been bad about it. The burnouts are shorter than they've ever been.
You almost need it to look hard, right? For the spectator. You almost need it to look hard. Like, man, those guys, they driving that thing all over the place, right? I mean, that looks good to the spectator.
I sure think so. Yeah. When I see Travis Pastrana do a backflip on a dirt bike, the shit looks hard. I don't want to try it. I don't want my kids to try it. I don't want to talk about it. But you go tell somebody, like, you work in drag racing or that you're a drag racer or whatever, their initial immediate reaction almost every single time, you just like driving a straight line, right? Like, hit the gas and driving a straight line really fast. I'm like, no, that's not at all. It pisses me off, man. Oh, it pisses me off, man. But it is a thing, and I do think it's how our sport translates on TV more than anything. Like, if you see it firsthand, no better example than like Ken Block telling Joe Costello there on the return road at ZMAX, like, I want no part of this. Because Joe asked him, like, hey, man, you want to jump in one of these things? You've been up Pikes Peak and you've drifted through Universal Studios. You've done all this stuff, won every rally race under the sun. You want to dive into a Top Fuel dragster? No. I'll leave that to Leah and the rest of these real race car drivers out here, right? I mean, it's funny, but that is only produced in person. And the problem is you only have so many, we talked about tracks having limited capacity. Yep. You've only got so many room. You can only touch so many people face to face in that, one-on-one live interaction environment. We've got to improve the television product. And maybe the way to do that isn't through better camera angles or slow-mo cameras or whatever. Maybe it's by roughing up our actual on-track product. We talk about it with reality TV shows. Maybe we need to slide a bottle of Patron across the table and tell everybody that we should have a drinking game and see what happens then. You know what I mean? Like, that's how they do it. They've got to make great TV.
Produced by JT Hudson.
And if they don't take everybody out to the bar and they let everybody go to church, I mean, you don't see that happen very often, right? Like, the cast of Real World isn't going to work at a church. right? Or to volunteer at a church. You know, they're not going to
only
volunteer
after,
at a homeless
crazy
camp.
Saturday night, you know,
No.
just to get some forgiveness.
Right? They're going to happy hour, right? Or they're going to the bar, or they're going somewhere where some shit could pop off, you know? I just, we're at times, Drag Race, we're so buttoned up. We're so polished, specifically the racing product itself, that we got to think about how it's impacting the on-track product and how it's impacting the entertainment value of it. So it's a fun conversation to have, and we will work on. We should actually run some contests and get the best would you rather type of questions sent to us, because these are, I actually think this is way more fun to talk about than who won.
Let us know.
Comp Eliminator last week or whatever.
Yep,
you know?
Send your suggestions.
What's the cell phone number?
Wes at dragillustrated.com.
Cell phone number is 660-988. No.
2313. That's the one to
Caroline's
call.
gonna get all these messages.
Yeah. Hey gang, I want to remind you guys before we start the next topic that each and every episode of the Wes Buck Show is made possible by way of our friends at Stroud Safety. Stroud Safety is known for their top quality racing safety equipment, from drag chutes and seatbelts to fire suits, gloves and blankets, all 100% made in America. Makes a difference to me. I hope it does you. Log on to stroudsafety.com/Wes to be entered to win automatically a free set of Defender Series seatbelts from our buddies up there in Oklahoma City. JT, Mike, I actually can't remember what the next question is. I just knew that Stroud was the sponsor. What do we got?
There you go.
Oh,
top
this
5
one.
Pro Mod drivers of all time.
And it's always fun when you get these top 5 lists, get people in their feels in a hurry. Especially when
it's hard to
one
pick
of the people,
5 though, right?
We need some kind of big disclaimer before this section.
Yeah. Hey man, this stuff's fun, and you got to pick somebody, and this is what gets people talking. If we just report who won or who's the best right now, I think you got to have these discussions, man. I really do. I don't know how you guys want to do this. I didn't think about that, how we should do our top 5 list, but I will tell you this. I'm going to put you on the spot. Listen. I'm going to make graphics. And you're going to have to stand behind these because I'm going to post them on social. I'm going to put Mike Carpenter's top 5 Pro Mod drivers all time and post it. And I'm glad I'm
going out of the country.
Yeah, I'm glad you're leaving the country. I'm going to put JT Hudson's top 5 Pro Mod drivers. I'm going to do myself as well, but I'm going to post them and let us get obliterated for it or whatever. On this one, I'm going to go first. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. All right. I want to go first. Okay.
I guarantee I know you're first.
Shit, he does. All right. You probably do.
Yeah,
all right.
Let's just hear it. Yeah.
Here's my top 5. And I kind of ordered these, but I didn't challenge you guys to put them in order. I can make it. This is our top 5. In no particular order. Yeah. My top 5 all-time Pro Mod drivers are Shannon Jenkins. Shannon Jenkins. Tuscaloosa, Alabama's own. The Iceman. This is a guy, I can't say enough about him. He puts the cool in cool. He is the James Dean of drag racing. I'm a huge fan, and he's definitely my number 1. Number 2, Scotty Cannon. Icon, won every championship under the sun, trendsetter, marketing, smart marketer, a good old boy. I don't even think he knew that he was a smart marketer. I don't think he knows that he's a smart marketer, but he knew to lean into his personality. He did all the right things, man. What an impact the Killer Red Tomato has made on the sport of drag racing. Killer Red Mater. That was his name of his car, JT, if you didn't know. Third, who I have argued on many occasions is the greatest of all time when it comes to door slammer drag racing, Ricky Smith. Tricky Ricky Smith, not always known as a Pro Mod guy. That's really been the second kind of iteration of Ricky Smith's career. Earned his stripes, right, obviously, and Modified Eliminator.
Third, really.
Third.
He's had multiple.
There have been. Mountain Motor, 500-inch Pro Stock, right? But I feel the impact he's had in the last 20 years in Pro Modified is really unrivaled, right? I mean, multiple different combinations. He was the get your car set up guy across the board. I mean, he was responsible for the success of so many programs. He's won a gazillion races, multiple NHRA Pro Mod championships, done it all. Most of that success has come with a nitrous combination. He's still one of the guys that's flying the nitrous flag, which means something to me. I just think is a part of Pro Mod that needs to be a part of Pro Mod. So Tricky Ricky Smith is my number 3. Number 4, this one hits close to home. The godfather of Pro Modified, Charles Carpenter, driver of the world's fastest 55 Chevy. Mike, my partner in crime, here's dad. You can't have a conversation about the top 5 Pro Mod guys of all time, in my opinion, without mentioning Charles Carpenter. He is another guy. Mike, I know you had a lot to do with this, at least later on, but even early on, clearly a guy that understood the value of marketing, understood the value of publicity, press, and promotion. I mean, he dived into that world's fastest conversation, and he saw his cars become models, toured all over creation, and did well doing it. Match racing multiple nights a week, racing in the IHRA, carried that success over into ADRL competition, PDRA most recently. I mean, that was one of the things that I tried to factor in, because there's some guys that were clearly leaving out that were hot and very significant for a moment or for a short period of time. But everybody that I've mentioned, for the most part, I believe, has had staying power through varying eras of Pro Modified, maintained their significance. Charles Carpenter, number 4. Number 5, lastly, this is another one that I don't know that he would be on everybody's list, but he sure as hell on mine. Jason Scruggs.
Yep, that's a good one.
Jason Scruggs, I think, put 8th Mile Pro Mod racing on the map. There were other people doing it, don't get me wrong, but as far as outlaw Pro Mods, that iconic 63 Corvette, the Scruggs family racing 63 Corvette with a 400-inch small block and a screw blower in it, that thing set so many trends. He was responsible for the lightweight movement in many ways. There were other contributors to that, but he was one of the guys that was notorious. Garrett Livingston there in South Missouri outside of Cape Girardeau would build these super lightweight exotic cars, titanium laden cars that were, I mean, the way Jason raced them, they were like short-lived. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't cars that could be raced for decades. They were so light. It
was like a right place, right time thing too. He was like the
really
face of this movement, the Outlaws.
He was one of the first guys that I ever saw that would racing with liners. Right? He wasn't at the track with beadlock wheels on the back of that thing. I mean, so many things, stuck with a clutch forever. But I also think that he fits into the category of a guy who's maintained his, he's still a difference maker.
He's raced through multiple eras.
He's raced through multiple eras. We've seen
NHRA
him
Pro Mod
be very competitive in NHRA Pro Modified. He was a part of ADRL Pro Extreme from beginning to end. He was a big part of it in the PDRA until the class went away. So he's made a lasting impact. And I still, right now, if I was going to go Pro Modified drag racing tomorrow and I wasn't going to drive the car, or my brother or something like that, and I could pick a driver, this is a question for the future as well. Like, who's your driver? I think I got to pick Jason Scruggs, man. I mean, he is a difference maker in every definition of the phrase, man. I mean, he is a difference maker and a wonderful guy as well. So anyways, that's my top 5. To recap briefly: Shannon the Iceman Jenkins, Scotty Cannon, Tricky Ricky Smith, Charles Carpenter, the godfather of Pro Modified, and driver of the Mississippi Missile, Jason Scruggs. I feel pretty damn good about that.
Yeah, that's
pretty solid.
Good. That's good.
Pretty
my list
solid.
has a lot of the same. I've got Scotty Cannon on my list, and I've got Ricky Smith on my list, and Charles Carpenter, because I like to drink beer with him and talk to him.
He likes to drink beer with you too. I think he misses that from the racetrack more than anything now that we're not out there.
Oh, but then I have Stevie Jackson. And I'm just a huge Stevie fan. You know, he can race anything, and Pro Mod, he's sure done good at it as well. And then Todd Tutterow, King Tut, and what he's done in Pro Mod for the sport and for all the other drivers and tuning. And man,
that's another dude who has had success through multiple eras
and in multiple types of racing.
Yeah, multiple types
legal,
of power adders.
Pretty much every one of them.
All of them.
And he's a guy, and you talked about like Ricky Smith's tree. We talk about coaching trees in football and guys, you want to hire somebody that worked for Andy Reid or whatever. And Ricky,
that's smart.
Ricky tutored Todd in a lot of ways. Todd was kind of or Ricky was his mentor in the early days. And I think a lot of the setup and a lot of the procedures and just the way he runs a car, you can date back to Ricky. And then Todd has since kind of, Ty Tutterow. It kind of, it evolves and it continues to branch out and make the tree larger. But yeah, to your point,
Stevie,
a lot of it,
right? Like,
yeah, Stevie
that could be in that tree, right?
Yep. So
I think Stevie is valid. I really do. I mean, I don't know how
Stevie's doesn't have across multiple types of racing.
He has,
too.
man. And he's raced multiple power adders, which I think is interesting. He's been a boundary, another guy that's been a great self-promoter, a great marketer. He's an international star, right? I mean, he's had success around the world. He's done so much in a relatively short amount of time. Like when you think about Stevie Jackson, he's definitely a guy that's been around for a long time. But it's also just unusual how much has happened in that guy's career in such a short amount of time. Man,
I think all the different levels, like grudge racing, video racing. I mean,
a lot of it at the same time, right? Got
Shadow, true.
Grudge
just
racing,
showing up everywhere.
or radio racing. They're going to NHRA Pro Mod. I mean,
he's got to be the most popular Pro Mod driver currently, right?
Right.
I would think
by far,
so.
I think. Yeah,
I would say by far.
I mean, Ricky might be up there.
Lyle is certainly developing
a
fan following right now. I think Mike Janis has a big, but he's not active, right? Who's some other guys that have a real following, like a palpable? Man,
I think it'd be between Stevie and Lyle right now.
I would have a hard time arguing with that, man. It's well, I'm actually glad you had Steve and Todd on your list. Todd definitely doesn't get, still to this day, really probably the credit he deserves.
It's because he's just a quiet, no nonsense, no bullshit.
Yep.
What you see is what you get. And a lot of times you get overlooked or you get forgotten about because you're not out there making a lot of controversy or a lot of noise. He just goes about his business. Man of walk softly and carry a big stick. And I think that in our game, more times than not, the people like Stevie, I mean, Stevie can obviously back it up, but he's going to bring it off the track too, where Todd has much more of that Southern gentleman type of
Jason Scruggs, same thing, man. I mean, if he was more of a self-promoter, more of a talker, God, I think he could be amongst the biggest, because Jason is just a guy you fall in love with.
And he's got swag.
And he does have swag. And if you go hang out with Jason Scruggs, he's a ton of fun. He's a great guy, tons of fun to be around, but he is a soft-spoken Southern gentleman that's kind of quiet and sticks to himself. And it's crazy how much of an impact that can make. Mike, I'm dying to hear yours. I was glad that there was a little bit of overlap, so you didn't leave me feeling like a psycho there, JT, but I think you have some, that's a good list, man. You should be proud of that.
Well, we definitely have some overlap, and I've got 6 names on mine, and I'm gonna.
That's not the assignment, Mike.
Special treatment for Mike. Shocking.
I'm gonna preface that before I get into it, but Ricky, obviously, where we've got overlap, we got Ricky, Scotty, and Shannon Jenkins. I think that
I didn't think you'd put Shannon on there.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
As you guys both said, no need to repeat all that for all the same reasons. Where we differ. Oh, actually, no, and my dad. Did I say my dad?
I was going to say, you didn't include your dad, man.
Yeah, that's where we overlap.
It would have been awesome. And it would have been a very Mike Carpenter move to be like,
leave him off.
Hey, Charles, don't watch this episode.
Don't. Yeah.
No, I got to, I got to have him up. We're cooking steaks on Sunday for Father's Day. I can't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you better keep him on there.
He's actually not going to see this until after Father's Day, so I probably could have gotten away with it. No, he's definitely on my list in no particular order for everything you said. My list focuses on longevity. I like that you brought that up, Wes. I feel like there are so many Pro Mod guys that started in the pre-Pro Mod days, and then it went to the Top Sportsman Quick 8 shootouts, and then the Quick 8 Pro Mod in the Southeast, and then IHRA Pro Mod, then ADRL, NHRA Pro Mod, PDRA, and there's so many guys that have raced all of those. We've mentioned a lot of them. And someone who has been there since day one, who is another extremely soft-spoken person, but has literally been involved in every power adder, every type of car and has been there since day one is Tommy Mooney. And as my dad likes to say, Tommy Mooney can single-handedly build a car from scratch and get it all the way to race ready, paint the thing. He's a super talented painter, which I don't think most people know. A lot of his early cars he painted as well. I know my dad's cars were painted by Tommy. So from raw tubing, raw materials, all the way to a finished car, set it up and drive it, and has been there since day one and is still out there racing, is Tommy Mooney. And then another one that has had a lot of longevity that maybe goes under the radar is Jim Halsey. Jim has been out there since the early 90s when he was like a teenager, maybe, in the Castrol Corvette. He had a Rooster mustache, JT, just like Rooster from Top Gun, out there rocking it in the early 90s. And Jim had some moderate success back then, but obviously really caught his stride with the series of McCamus red Camaros, first in the fives,
for a
really
nitrous car.
A force to be reckoned with in ADRL, and now arguably the most dominant force in PDRA Pro Nitrous, still with a Fulton engine combination, which he's had for 30 years, just sticking with the combination and continuing to race and do extremely well through decades, through literally 3 or 4 different decades. I think Jim has to be at this point on that list. I think someone like Jim, maybe 10, 15 years ago, you didn't put him on your list. Maybe that same thing could go with Ricky, but they've had such great success in those time periods. We were referencing Competition Plus's 2010 article of the top 20 pro mod drivers of all time. And if you go through that, a lot of it holds up, but a lot has changed since then.
I was just looking
up or down.
Ricky Smith was 15th on that
and
list.
He'd have to be way up on your list now because of what he's done since that list came out 12 years ago or whenever that was. Same with Halsey. Halsey's on there, but you'd have to move him up just for what he's done in PDRA Pro Nitrous. So those guys,
and like you think about some of the names that are on the list now, or on that list, like Josh Hernandez was an honorable mention on that list. I don't mean any disrespect to Josh Hernandez. Like, I think Josh was a great guy, and I hope he's doing well.
But like you said to start,
it was like kind of a blip on the radar. Really,
he did well for a few years, dominated in the Rage 57 Chevy, and then the
68
National
Camaro.
Guard. Sponsored by National Guard for a little while as well. There are so many guys that we're leaving out, and then we'll probably get feedback on that.
Like Bill Coolman
dominate.
is one that I thought about. First
Coleman,
car over 200 miles an hour. Like, how do you not include him in this conversation?
Rob Vandergriff, you almost have to lump him in with my dad.
Yeah. You know, the world's fastest 57 Chevy. Jim Halsey was on my short list as well because of that staying power. The first 5-second pass for a nitrous car, like that moment, it breaks my freaking heart that I wasn't there, like an idiot. Well, not an idiot. I actually chose to go racing with my dad and my uncle at Byron for the World Power Wheel Standing Championships. So it was the same weekend, and I drove up to Byron, Illinois with my dad to go racing. Alicia went with me. And we rode up in my dad's beat up this old ass Suburban that he had with a big block and a 400 turbo. And it was like 70 miles an hour pulling a trailer. It was like 6,000 RPM. It was a horrible trip. But anyways, we went up there, didn't do that great. All we did was like cave in the oil pan of the Corvette, and, just a disastrous weekend, to be honest. But I remember my phone ringing. John Ford III called me. He did it, bro. He did it. And Jim Halsey had made the first 5-second pass for a nitrous car.
Was up there, right?
Van Abernathy was up there. What an iconic moment still to this day. And like the red car that he raced. I like the new car, don't get me wrong, but Jim Halsey needs to be in a red Camaro. I'm still a little bit not okay with it, to be honest.
Red, Jim.
Paint that thing red, Jim. Jimmy Winlights needs to be in a red Camaro. But
let's talk about some other guys.
Tommy Mooney was a great one.
Well, no, I mean, just the staying power. I'm going through this competition plus list now. Too. The staying power
Mike
of
Castellana.
A lot of these guys. Yeah, Castellana.
How about Tim McCamus? Like Tim McCamus won the first ever Pro Mod championship, right?
Yep.
And
Mike Janis is another one. You mentioned him earlier and has had incredible staying power. There was another one on my list that I saw a minute ago.
Al Billis. I mean,
that's it.
You think about Al Billis. I mean, he has left a significant mark on the sport of drag, on pro modified drag racing,
and still continues to this day to be heavily involved.
There's several of these guys that, but I was kind of taken by that. Mitch Stott. I think Mitch and Quayne Stott are not celebrated. That run that Mitch Stott made in Darlington, South Carolina, when he clicked off the first ever 5-second pass. I know it didn't come in competition. It was a test run, but that run, February 14th, 2003, Mitch Scott clicked off a 5.98 with a 5 at 231 miles an hour. The car was like 150 pounds under IHRA legal weight, so it wasn't an IHRA wreck, but it was still the first ever door slammer to go in the fives. And it happens so frequently now, we're desensitized to the significance of it. I mean, alcohol funny cars run in the fives. And to see a suspended door car do that, run in the 5-second zone at over 230 or approaching 250, well beyond that at this point now, that feat still, we don't recognize how significant it is and the balls it took, the outside of the box thinking it took to accomplish that. So to not have them in our top 5, I mean, we're gonna definitely take some heat for it. But this is a fun conversation.
I think we mentioned
all these
enough
guys,
names, enough names.
Mike Castellana, he's multiple-time champion, notoriously good-looking race.
You have to
cars,
lump him in with Shannon.
Great lever. You have to lump him in with Shannon, I believe. Yeah. Animal Jim. Animal Jim never had a whole lot of success necessarily, but I mean, you talk about a guy who brought a big character and played the part and was big on PR and interviewed. Would do an interview with anybody holding a microphone.
That's the lost lesson on today's generation of racers and even pro mod racers is that we're all so concerned with on-track performance. Back in the day, I mean, it helped if you ran well, but I don't know if Animal Jim ever even did he win a race. You could make up for it in willingness to do an interview or to go display your car at a dealership or some show or something, or in interface with fans and sponsors, t-shirts, hero cards. That was really what the first era of Pro Mod was about. The cars were awesome, but nobody really cared, what number came up on the scoreboard at that time.
I mean, back then, it was like you get a new car and you get a photo shoot done. Yeah. Like you're hiring a photographer to get hero cards made and get your PR photos and kind of get your head. I mean, you knew that. Now you like roll up to someone's trailer and be like, hey, man, would you mind like cleaning this thing up, buttoning it all up, taking it down to the top end of the track so we can get some photos? He goes, I ain't got time, man. We're going to try to put a different motor in it. I don't know. Like, no, we don't really want to get it down. Right? I mean, you hear it more often than a guy would think. So really fun conversation, guys. I'm glad we did that one. Those top 5 graphics, I'm literally going to make them and get them circulating soon because I think it's worth getting people talking about. It's a fun conversation to have, a fun debate to have, and we need to do more stuff like this if you ask me. That's my opinion, but whatever.
There's going to be some hugely obvious name that someone's going to call us out on that we didn't mention.
More than likely, but that's okay, guys. Before we dive into our next topic of conversation, gang, I want to remind you that the Wes Buck Show is brought to you by FlowRacing.com. If you're a drag racer or a drag racing fan, you got to get on board with Flow Racing, the world leader in sports live streaming. Flow Racing provides unlimited access to drag racing's biggest events like Donald Long's Lights Out, No Mercy, and Sweet 16, every stop on the PDRA and NMCA tours, Funny Car Chaos, World Cup Finals, Streetcar Super Nationals, and much more. The platform provided by Flow Racing is 100% changing the sport of drag racing for the better, and there's no limit to the good they can do here. So log on to flowracing.com/Drag Illustrated today and join the movement. Guys, what do we have next?
We have
Jinx.
Oh,
pinch poke.
Is this the last question?
Yeah, last one.
Okay, last one of the day, guys. Pick one and ride. What Street Outlaws or No Prep Kings star would you bring up to the NHRA Top Fuel or Funny Car ranks? This is fun because we talk all the time about who from the NHRA or PDRA or whatever that we want to see show up in No Prep Kings. Well, let's flip the script. friends, let's do it. Who from that walk of life? There's a lot of stars and cars over there right now, and so we're tabling the cars. Which one of these drivers that are active right now? And I think we can do America's List, Street Outlaws, the OG show, as well as, even like the Farm Truck and Asian spinoff, if you guys want to throw one of their names in the hat, as well as, of course, the season 5 cast of No Prep Kings. What do you got? JT, I want to hear from you first. You're like, you pay close attention to this stuff.
The obvious choice would be like Ryan Martin, right? But I'm actually going to go with Justin Swanstrom. Just because I'd like to just see all the havoc he would cause over there, man. Like stirring the pot and talking trash.
He would set the pot. Well, based on how he treats his Lexus,
really
he would take the pot and blow that son of a bitch to pieces.
He's perfect for a nitro funny car, man. He's ready to jump out of that thing covered in clutch dust, body half hanging off.
Yeah, I'm a huge Justin Swanstrom fan. Yeah, I'm a huge Justin Swanstrom fan, but I didn't, to be honest, like he didn't even cross my mind. Like I think you're right. Like I was going immediately with Ryan or whatever, but Justin would be fun. Like he would upset the apple cart over there.
I'm going with the fun factor.
That kind of reminds me of Scotty Cannon.
Good point.
Scotty kind of was that outlaw, rough around the edges. Social media wasn't around, so he wasn't able to voice himself the way that he would have been able to now. But
Scotty's scrutinized.
Scotty's actually kind of a quiet guy, but just the look and just his attitude and how fierce of a competitor he was, that translated over to Nitro Funny Car. Kind of reminds me of that.
I don't know that the level of dedication that Justin Swanstrom has displayed here early in 2022. We will be talking about this for a long time. I'm not trying to blow smoke or anything, but changing engine combinations, wrecking the car a couple of times, tearing it up. I mean, it's been painted. He was so proud of it, right? Brings this thing out. It's all freshened up, looking slick. Next thing you know, it's blown into a bazillion pieces, and it's been windshields blown out of it, blowing up motors, tearing up stuff, and continuing to show up, rebuilding the car
like it's
in a week.
Nitro Funny Car.
He's probably the guy who's got the most experience with like fixing stuff in a hurry, patching carbon fiber together. Mike, I'm curious who are you thinking? There's a lot of hitters in there.
Yeah, that's a good pick. My pick's actually in the graphic down here, Lizzy Musi, because I know that at least at one point in time, this was on her career radar, was to move up to Nitro Funny Car or Top Fuel.
Do you think it still is? Just curious.
I don't know. Maybe now that she's making bukus of money and having all the success on No Prep Kings, maybe that's changed.
I bet not.
I think they're very.
She's probably our most professional of the drivers.
Yeah,
around all those shows.
Most marketable. Probably and most marketable. I feel like NHRA could get their hands around that, and really do something with it. But I feel like at this point, I mean, if this No Prep Kings deal continues on like it is, that they're very comfortable and happy with the way that's going, and it really fits her and Pat and the whole. It's like the evolution of the Pro Street deal. I think reminiscing about Tony Christian and Pat the last couple of weeks, like we have after Tony's passing, reminded me of how perfect of a fit this No Prep Kings deal is for Pat and Lizzy. But I wonder, I haven't asked her about it in a while, but I know at one point her goal was to evolve from door cars to the big stage. And I think that it would be a great fit.
She would kill over there, right? I mean, with just the success of how women drivers, I think, have stood out and created a fan following almost. She would, there's definitely some scrutiny attached to it. I think Leah Pruitt, Leah would attest to that. I'm sure Erica would attest to that. Many of the women that have been
there's involved, a lot of top women over there now. She would be kind of one of several, whereas in No Prep Kings, it's just her, really. I mean, I know Kayla Morton's there.
Think of the fan base that you would get, like if something like this was to happen.
Yeah. It would be so good for NHRA.
Oh my God!
It would be bigger. It's crazy because it would be bigger. I'm gonna take some shit for this as well, but it would be a bigger deal to have Lizzy Musi go NHRA Top Fuel racing than it would be for Tony Schumacher to go No Prep racing. I mean, 100%. I mean, it would 100%.
So much of a different type of fan over to the NHRA who might start paying attention to the rest.
I think Lizzy has enough mainstream and crossover appeal that if she just showed up in a Top Fuel car this weekend, a lot of people would know her name and know that driver. Whereas some of these other No Prep guys, maybe they wouldn't be as familiar with.
Well, and we forget, oftentimes I think we talk about how young these folks are and stuff, but like Lizzy too, she's been drag racing for a hot minute. I mean, this isn't.
Yeah, Lizzy's. I think she's 30 or 31. She's probably gonna be mad at me for saying that.
Yeah,
but.
she's gonna probably be really mad at you. It's just shout out to Mike with but when we put, I was just gonna look when we put Lizzy on the cover for the first time. That was way back, man. I mean, it was
DI-84 back in
right here on my wall.
Yeah,
Yep.
DI-84.
What's it say?
February 2014.
Yeah.
So I mean, she's been at it for 10 years
shot.
almost.
She was racing Top Sportsman at that time in the Edelbrock red Camaro. I forget who owned that car, but Pat tuned it and she drove it, and then she quickly started ascending. But yeah, we put her on the cover way before she had done so much of what she's gone on to do.
I think those are both great picks, man. Justin Swanstrom. I didn't think about that one off the top of my head. I think I immediately went to like who's prim and proper enough to fit, who could pull it off, right? I really think Ryan Martin would certainly have to be my pick. I think he's somebody who would fit that mold fairly well. I think he knows how to play that game, be the professional. I mean, I think that he's suited for it. I think that the level of professionalism that he's bringing to his program right now is the difference maker. A lot of people have badass hot rods and badass power plants, big horsepower, but he's bringing a level of maintenance, a level of testing, a level of prior preparation that I think is keeping him in the winner's circle. He's won 5 races this year. I think
like race ready.
Most race ready.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely think he's the name that you.
And it would be like, for sure. I mean, you want to talk about
yeah.
something that would like put NHRA over in a one fell swoop. Ryan Martin showing up and racing funny car against Matt Hagan and John Force and Ron Capps. Holy cow.
Yep.
I do think there's a couple of them that have some swagger. I think Daddy Dave Comstock is another guy that's got it. He's got the it factor. I think Kai is a little slept on. You know, some of those OG guys. I mean, it was Kai Kelly. Some of these guys, they've got it. They've got some edge about them. They've got the street cred.
We've seen Sean Ellington drive the shit out of that car at Valdosta before.
Murder Nova. I didn't even think about him because he wasn't on my list here in front of me. But yeah, Murder Nova would be a fun one.
What about Big Chief?
You know, I remember vividly when Big Chief showed up at the NHRA national event in Englishtown, New Jersey, many moons ago, and it was he was there as a kind of a repairing the relationship between the NHRA and the street outlaw masses, and it was amidst that whole NHRA banning, taking all their competition license. That was a significant misstep. But anyways, looking back on that, it was weird, man. And he had a desire to do it. I mean, he threw his hat into the ring and it was a huge thing. He showed up to a pro mod race, the U.S. Nationals, with a dually and a motorhome and an enclosed tag trailer, blaring 3-6 Mafia over his speaker system, right? With people just
fans everywhere, though, right?
The only crowd bigger or as big was outside of John Force's pit, and that is no bullshit.
I remember watching
and that's a long time ago, too. So
I remember watching it on NHRA TV, or maybe it was whatever preceded NHRA TV. I remember tuning in just to watch that. He made like a solo hit down the track, and it went
like a 624 or something, which I actually thought was really pretty respectable for a small block, a Pontiac, like a conventional headed Pontiac, right? I mean, it wasn't an exotic combination or anything like that, but he tried, man, and it was a huge deal. But I don't know that Big Chief, I don't think he wanted to be. I mean, he's a classic example, and this is another question we could throw in for another episode in the future as we start stacking up some of these evergreen podcast episodes. But I don't think nobody that we've mentioned, I don't think that they would leave. That's the elephant in the room. Is I don't think there's a single person that we've mentioned that wants.
They're getting more fame there than they would in the NHRA.
And it depends on your motivation, right? Like if your motivation is to sell sponsorships, to get paid, to race in front of big, like if that's your motivation, I don't know that there's a better opportunity than NHRA, or excuse me, than No Prep Kings. But if you want to race against the best racers in the world, the highest level of competition, the best equipment, there is no doubt that you need to go race NHRA.
I think we talked about that before, and I think we had Lyle on, and we asked him that same question.
Oh, yeah.
And I think my argument was, if you're trying to make a living going drag racing and build a career and like kind of run your own business, being out there on the road drag racing, no Prep Kings is where it's at. If you've already been successful in business and you've got tons of money or you've got connections with sponsors or whatever, and you want to go, put your hat in the ring with these top racers, NHRA may be the way to go. I can't believe I'm saying that, because NHRA always was the place to do what I said first, was
but even
to
if
build
you ran
your career. But it's
even
changed.
Even if you ran it for a couple of years, I mean, you would set yourself up. If you wanted to go back to NHRA, you would set yourself up almost to be, I guess, relevant for quite some time.
I mean, with Ryan Martin's winnings, I mean, we don't know exactly what the numbers are, but we can only speculate that he's doing very well out there. I mean, he could go NHRA racing if he wanted to.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
Just off of his winnings. And so it's I don't know how you bridge the gap or resolve those two things, but NHRA has gone so heavily into the, I don't want to say hobby racer, but you have to be independently wealthy or sponsored by someone who is to go NHRA racing, whereas you can blaze your own path in NPK if you do the right things and build your brand, build your personality, self-promote, and are willing to make the sacrifices that it takes to do that kind of racing. Whereas in NHRA, there's really not even any hired guns in NHRA. There's only a couple that remain.
There are not as many as people want to believe there are.
Two of the best hired guns, in my opinion, Ron Capps and Antron Brown, now own their own teams.
So they're no longer, I mean, they can't be considered that anymore.
So those numbers continue to dwindle. I don't even know if you could put on one hand the number of hired gun, A+ level drivers that are hired solely for their driving,
their ability
and marketability or whatever. There's other things attached to almost all of these rides.
That's
money,
sad. And that's sad. Yeah. Really it is.
Yeah, and that's and I do want to save this for a future conversation, but the value proposition has to change. It really does. I mean, right now, between merchandise sales, guaranteed money, show up money, and available purse money, not to mention sponsorship opportunity, like, it's really big. It's weighted very heavily over there. Like, I don't know, these details don't need to be public right now, but I mean, I know they will be soon, but there are several of them